What if you woke up tomorrow and were told you had to leave the country you've called home for years? Under the Trump administration, thousands faced this very reality. But which countries were hit the hardest? Stay with us as we break down the 15 nations most affected by deportation policies in the USA. Immigration has always been a heated debate in the United States, but during Donald Trump's presidency, policies took a dramatic turn. With an emphasis on stricter border control, travel bans, and mass deportations, many immigrant communities found themselves in fear. In this video, we're counting down the 15 countries most affected by deportations under Trump's administration, based on official reports, ICE data, and global reactions. Let's dive in. Number 15. Mexico has always topped the list for deportations from the U.S. Trump's administration intensified border security measures. ICE raids became more frequent in Mexican communities. The Remain in Mexico policy added new challenges for asylum seekers. Many families were forced to live in limbo at the border. Increased scrutiny led to heightened fear among Mexican nationals. Some were deported despite living in the U.S. for decades. The policy changes drew criticism from human rights groups. Thousands faced harsh conditions upon returning to Mexico. The economic impact on deported families was severe. Mexican communities in the U.S. rallied to protest the policies. Deportations affected both undocumented and documented immigrants. Children of deported parents often suffered immensely. Advocacy groups worked tirelessly to provide legal aid. Despite the challenges, Mexican nationals continue to seek better opportunities. Number 14. El Salvador faced a surge in deportations during Trump's term. Gang violence in the country led many to flee for safety. Temporary Protected Status, TPS, was a lifeline for Salvadorans. The Trump administration sought to end TPS for 200,000 Salvadorans. Families feared being sent back to dangerous conditions. Deportations separated many children from their parents. Legal battles ensued to protect TPS holders from deportation. The Salvadoran government struggled to accommodate returning nationals. U.S. advocacy groups highlighted the humanitarian crisis in El Salvador. Many deported Salvadorans faced unemployment back home. Protests erupted in both the U.S. and El Salvador against the policies. The fear of deportation disrupted lives and livelihoods. Community organizations stepped in to support affected families. Despite the challenges, Salvadorans continue to fight for their rights. The issue remains a topic of debate in immigration reform discussions. Number 13. Guatemala's citizens often flee due to extreme poverty and violence. The Trump administration signed asylum agreements with Guatemala. These agreements forced asylum seekers to remain in Guatemala. Deportations to Guatemala increased significantly during this time. Many deportees returned to regions plagued by gang violence. Families faced hardships upon arriving back in Guatemala. Human rights groups condemned the U.S. policies. Guatemala's infrastructure struggled to support returning nationals. Deported children faced challenges reintegrating into society. U.S. policies created a ripple effect in Central America. Many asylum seekers gave up hope of finding safety in the U.S. Community programs aimed to assist deported individuals. Legal experts criticized the asylum agreements as inhumane. The Trump administration's stance created diplomatic tensions. Guatemalans continue to seek refuge despite the challenges. Number 12. Honduras faced similar challenges to El Salvador and Guatemala. Deportations surged under Trump's immigration policies. Gang violence and poverty drove many to seek asylum. The administration pressured Honduras to sign asylum agreements. Asylum seekers were often denied entry to the U.S. Many Hondurans faced detention before being deported. Deportations left families separated and in despair. The economic impact on deported individuals was significant. Honduras struggled to reintegrate returning nationals. Humanitarian groups criticized the lack of support for deportees. Many deportees faced dangerous conditions upon return. Community organizations worked to provide resources for families. Legal advocates challenged the administration's policies. Hondurans continue to seek safety despite the risks. The immigration debate remains a contentious issue. Number 11. Haiti saw a rise in deportations during Trump's presidency. The end of Temporary Protected Status, TPS, impacted 50,000 Haitians. Many Haitians fled to the U.S. after the devastating 2010 earthquake. The administration argued conditions in Haiti had improved enough. Deported Haitians faced unemployment and housing crises back home. Human rights groups criticized the decision to end TPS for Haitians. Families with deep U.S. ties were forced to leave. Legal battles delayed, but didn't stop deportations for many. Some returned to unsafe conditions due to ongoing political instability. Haitian communities rallied to fight against the deportation policies. Advocacy groups sought to provide legal support for TPS holders. Children born in the U.S. were particularly affected by family separations. Protests erupted in Haitian American neighborhoods across the U.S. Despite these challenges, Haitians continue to strive for stability. The issue highlighted the complex relationship between Haiti and the U.S. Number 10. Nigeria faced increased deportations under Trump's immigration crackdown. Trump once referred to African nations in derogatory terms, sparking outrage. Many Nigerians were deported despite holding valid visas. Nigerian students in the U.S. felt targeted by stricter visa rules. Deportees often returned to economic and social challenges. Human rights groups criticized the lack of due process in deportations. The Nigerian government expressed concerns about U.S. policies. Families were separated as loved ones were sent back abruptly. Community organizations worked to support deported Nigerians. Trump's travel ban included several African countries, including Nigeria. This move disrupted lives and strained U.S.-Nigeria relations. Nigerian Americans advocated for fairer immigration laws. Despite challenges, Nigerian immigrants continue to thrive in the U.S. Many deported individuals struggled to rebuild their lives in Nigeria. The issue sparked debates on racial and immigration justice. Number 9. Indian nationals were not immune to Trump's immigration policies. Stricter H-1B visa rules impacted many Indian professionals. Indian students faced uncertainty over their visa statuses. The administration targeted undocumented Indian immigrants for deportation. Families were left divided as deportations rose. Deportees often returned to stigma and economic challenges in India. India expressed concerns over the treatment of its citizens in the U.S. Community groups advocated for fair treatment and legal assistance. The tech industry lobbied against stricter visa regulations. Many deported individuals had lived in the U.S. for years. Students protested changes to OPT and H-1B rules. Despite challenges, Indian Americans remain a significant U.S. community. The immigration policies strained U.S.-India diplomatic ties. Deported individuals often struggled to reintegrate into Indian society. Advocacy efforts continue to fight for immigrants' rights. Number 8. Pakistani nationals were significantly affected by deportation policies. Increased scrutiny led to a rise in deportations under Trump. The administration argued that stricter controls improved national security. Many deportees returned to economic and political instability in Pakistan. Community organizations worked to support deported individuals. Trump's travel ban heightened fears among Pakistani immigrants. Students faced hurdles with visa extensions and OPT programs. Families were separated as undocumented individuals were sent back. The Pakistani government expressed concerns over the policies. Legal battles sought to challenge the administration's actions. Pakistani American groups rallied for immigration reform. Deported individuals often struggled to restart their lives back home. Community leaders called for a fairer approach to immigration enforcement. Despite these challenges, Pakistani Americans continue to contribute to U.S. society. The policies underscored ongoing debates about immigration and security. Number 7. Venezuelans fled economic and political crises in record numbers. Many sought asylum in the U.S. but faced deportations under Trump. The U.S. initially granted temporary protected status, TPS, to some. However, many asylum claims were rejected due to strict policies. Deported individuals returned to dire conditions in Venezuela. Human rights groups warned of the dangers for returnees. Families were separated as asylum cases were denied. The Trump administration took a tough stance on Venezuelan refugees. Deportations sparked protests in Venezuelan American communities. Legal battles sought to stop removals, citing humanitarian concerns. Many deported individuals faced persecution upon return. Venezuelan opposition leaders urged the U.S. to halt deportations. The political crisis in Venezuela worsened during this period. Advocacy groups worked to provide legal aid to Venezuelans. Despite deportations, many Venezuelans still sought U.S. protection. Number 6. Cuban immigrants historically received favorable immigration policies. Trump ended the wet foot, dry foot policy in 2017. This policy shift made it harder for Cubans to stay in the U.S. Deportations of Cubans increased significantly under Trump. Many were sent back despite fearing political persecution. The Cuban government criticized the deportations. Families were left devastated by sudden removals. Legal challenges sought to protect asylum seekers from deportation. Cuban-American communities protested the new policies. ICE increased raids targeting undocumented Cubans. Some deportees had lived in the U.S. for decades. The policies strained U.S.-Cuba diplomatic relations. Cuban immigrants faced uncertainty over their legal status. Human rights groups called for protections for Cuban asylum seekers. Despite stricter policies, Cubans continued attempting to reach the U.S. Number 5. The Dominican Republic saw a rise in deportations under Trump. Many Dominicans in the U.S. faced visa denials and removals. ICE targeted undocumented immigrants, increasing deportation rates. Some deportees had lived in the U.S. for decades. Families were separated as deportation policies intensified. Dominicans faced economic hardship after being sent back. Human rights groups criticized mass removals of longtime residents. Legal battles sought to protect Dominicans from unjust deportation. U.S.-born children of deportees were left behind in the U.S. Dominican-American communities rallied against Trump's policies. The U.S. tightened visa requirements for Dominican nationals. The Dominican government struggled to support returning citizens. Many deportees faced joblessness and social stigma in their homeland. Despite the challenges, Dominicans continued seeking better opportunities. Advocacy groups provided resources for deported individuals. Number 4. The Philippines saw a surge in deportations under Trump's policies. ICE increased raids in Filipino-American communities. Many Filipinos faced visa denials and permanent removals. Some deportees had lived in the U.S. for decades. Filipino workers in the healthcare sector were particularly affected. Legal battles fought against unjust removals of Filipino immigrants. The Philippine government sought to assist deported individuals. Many deported Filipinos struggled to rebuild their lives back home. Families were torn apart due to strict immigration policies. Community organizations fought to protect Filipino immigrants. Visa restrictions made it harder for Filipinos to enter the U.S. The issue sparked protests in both the U.S. and the Philippines. U.S. immigration policies strained diplomatic relations with Manila. Despite deportations, Filipinos continued migrating for better jobs. Advocacy groups provided legal and financial assistance. Number 3. Sudanese immigrants faced increased deportations under Trump. Many sought asylum in the U.S. due to political instability. The travel ban heavily impacted Sudanese nationals. Refugees were denied entry despite fleeing war and persecution. Deportations left families separated and in crisis. Human rights groups condemned Trump's immigration policies. Sudanese deportees struggled with economic hardships upon return. Many were sent back despite fears of persecution. The Sudanese American community protested mass deportations. Legal efforts attempted to stop removals of Sudanese refugees. The U.S. refugee cap made it harder for Sudanese to seek asylum. Sudanese immigrants faced discrimination under stricter policies. Families were torn apart by travel bans and visa restrictions. Despite challenges, the Sudanese diaspora continued fighting for rights. The issue highlighted global debates on refugee protections. Number 2. Somalis faced some of the harshest immigration crackdowns under Trump. Somalia was included in Trump's controversial travel ban. Many Somali asylum seekers were denied entry into the U.S. ICE increased deportation flights to Somalia. Families were separated as asylum requests were denied. Human rights groups warned of persecution for deportees. Deported Somalis faced violence and instability back home. U.S. courts fought to protect Somali refugees from removal. Trump's travel ban sparked outrage in Somali American communities. Community groups provided legal aid to affected individuals. Many Somali immigrants had lived in the U.S. for decades. Protests erupted in response to mass deportations. Legal challenges sought to reverse the travel ban and deportations. Despite policies, Somalis continued seeking safety in the U.S. The issue remains a contentious part of U.S. immigration policy. Number 1. Iran was heavily affected by Trump's immigration policies. Trump's travel ban blocked Iranians from entering the U.S. Many Iranians were denied asylum despite credible fears. Families were separated due to visa restrictions. ICE targeted Iranian nationals for deportation. Iranian-American communities protested the policies. Legal battles sought to overturn the travel ban. Some deported Iranians faced persecution back home. Human rights groups criticized the policies as discriminatory. U.S.-Iran relations worsened due to these immigration restrictions. Deported individuals struggled with economic hardships. Despite challenges, Iranians continued seeking U.S. opportunities. Advocacy groups fought for Iranian asylum seekers. The travel ban remained controversial throughout Trump's presidency. Immigration policies toward Iran remain a topic of debate today. Immigration policies shape lives, and during Trump's presidency, thousands faced an uncertain future. While some argued for stronger borders, others fought for human rights and protection. The debate continues today. What do you think? Should immigration policies be stricter or more compassionate? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis on global issues.